Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how's it going?
Yeah, good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Sorry that if anything technical goes wrong, I'm on my manager's phone in an office somewhere in King's Cross. So
Oh, bless you. Thanks, Jessica. Really appreciate
that's
it.
no,
Sorry.
absolutely fine. I apologize if anything goes a bit weird. Let's hope it's all fine.
That's the power of pre-recording. Then if it does, we can just quickly pick it up. But yeah, really appreciate your time.
No worries at all.
It's nice to get the chance to speak to you in long form instead of that kind of fleeting chat that we had down at the
Yeah.
Barbican. Yeah.
No, those things are always a little stressful. Those,
Yeah.
everyone's
Yeah.
moving around so much.
Listen, I hope you got from our short conversation that night how much I enjoyed the film and how important your work on it is in terms of just the tone and the kind of the joy that you have in watching the film. So congratulations.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
When did you first? I don't know. How were you brought onto the project? What was your kind of? What was your ask? What was the ask of you?
Um, Being brought on was kind of surreal, but actually quite straightforward. Basically, sorry. Um, Yorgos had heard the album released in 2020. The album's called Winterizer, and it's basically pop songs. Quite unusual ones, but they are songs. There's nothing really anything instrumental or cinematic or scory about them.
Hmm.
And he was, trying to put a team together for this project. And I think compared with his previous films, it was something that was maybe a lot more exuberant in terms of its artistic style. And I know he'd already got, a lot of the visual stuff together. And I just got an email in saying that he was, he'd listened to it a lot and wanted to have a conversation. And then I was very swiftly sent like the full script for the film and it's like 200-page visual document that had, like the set design and the concept artwork and the costumes and so on. And I
Wow.
and I knew I was about to chat to him like the next day, so I was looking at this stuff and thinking like this is this is a really large amount of information being sent for something I have no idea, why I'm involved in the conversation of. And then yeah, he just said, "Do you want to have a go at writing some stuff for it?" So I did, and now we're here.
Yeah. What was your so many questions from that? I mean, that's amazing. I love the idea. Did it come with a security guard? Because I know how kind of like he's able to keep things so see, in the world that we live in where everybody shares everything and it's really quite hard to keep things under wraps. He
Mm,
manages to do that with so much of his work, which makes the experience of being in it so much more enjoyable as well. Um, but what was your reaction when you went through that huge kind of like experience, I guess, that he sent you?
well, as in reading the script and
Yeah,
seeing
what
the
did you
stuff.
think? What was yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, I thought it was wonderful. I was very, it was very moving, I recall, because I mean, I was really familiar with his films before, and I thought they were wonderful. I think, especially The Lobster I think that was the first film of his I saw when I was at university. And I thought it was, really, beautiful, striking films and like really amazing explorations of social psychology. But I think that had often been associated with this kind of awkwardness and this clinical, deliberate lack of like expressive emotionality, what he'd done so far. And so reading the script, it was so warm and the characters were so, there was something so lovable about them. Even the ones who were kind of pretty explicitly unpleasant people, there was
Yeah.
still, they seemed a bit more like stupid children than inherently evil people. And like I think the entire cast had this. That's kind of what's interesting about the film as well, I guess, because the conceit is that Bella's, a kid, at least initially, but actually, I think so many of the characters, like Godwin and Duncan and the
Yeah.
general, towards the end, they've got this childishness. And they throw tantrums, and like it's almost like a morality play. Their emotional faults are in really kind of like harsh relief, like almost like kids basically. So yeah, no, I was really, I I felt so warmly towards the entire system of characters and the whole story, as well as just Bella. And that was a great impetus to like not to want to write a lot of music that actually reflected that warmth and that
Yeah.
naivety.
Were there any kind of musical references within that? Because kind of historically, Yorgos has never gone down that kind of traditional route of using a composer in his films. He's used that wonderful relationship between music and sound, particularly with the sound design that he so clearly cares about in his films. But this is a kind of different kind of collaboration for him really than he's used to. And I wondered whether that was something you talked to him about, and asked him kind of why he was going down this route with this project.
Sure. I mean, I tried not to look a gift horse in the mouth too much with it. I was aware that he had not used a composer before, and I think he has. He's a very yeah, culturally educated listener. Like the kind of range of music he was using in the film was like really interesting and
Mm,
striking mix of more traditional compositions and contemporary stuff, and some quite, but some like Luke Ferrari and some quite unusual things. I did get the sense that not just my department, but yeah, like the visuals for the film and the cosmetics and everything, he really wanted this to have something totally alien and totally ex nihilo and exclusive to itself.
mm-hmm,
I think that was really important for the entire feel of the film. And when we started talking, the thing we sort of half wordlessly laid out was that we wouldn't talk about any other film scores. There wouldn't be any other references. We didn't even talk about any other composers in general. Like we like there was no point where we discussed which musicians we both liked or which composers we did. We were kind of more talking abstractly, I think, about the film and about I think attitudes towards emotional representation, like how
yeah,
humor can work, how melodrama can work, exaggeration, subversion, all these kind of things. And I think it was great to be on the same page, knowing like, okay, this is kind of I can now see a bit more why he wanted to work with me, because I think we actually have really similar opinions on these more unusual ways of trying to transmit some quite important emotional themes.
yeah. It's and kind of we hear. Was there a conversation around instrumentation in a way? Because I guess there's a for you, what did you levitate towards from reading the script and then having a conversation about what he was looking for? What were you kind of drawn to in terms of musically?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think again, like part of his style is very hands off, and I think it's great. He gives so much independence and so much trust, and like I
Mm,
don't think he wants to be that much part of the process, just because I think it means that he can get so if you're if one is that involved in the making of something, it's quite hard to see the objective feeling that it gives afterwards. So he almost wants to see each department's work as an audience member. So he gave, complete freedom. Like, he would never say anything about instruments or be in the same room while I was writing and saying, "Oh, should we try this out? Should we try this?" Maybe it was like a really unexpected amount
amazing.
of trust. Yeah, exactly. So instrumentation wise, there were a lot of different ideas, and I think actually getting the textures and the instruments right was a really big part of delivering what I wanted to. So much stuff with instruments being recorded separately and then manipulated, and I wanted this feeling of um something that seems familiar, but actually in the kind of subconscious lizard brain part of that you can tell there's something a bit off with it, and like similar to the feeling where with Bella, where so many people are instantly magnetized towards her, even though there's alarm bells going off in their
Mm.
subconscious saying like this isn't right, but it's so alluring to so many in different ways. So like cellos that are made of violins, and like getting a lot of high pitch instruments to and made very low, and very low pitch instruments made very high, so that there's a lot of instruments that sound like, oh yeah, that's an oboe doing something, or some cellos or whatever, and it's actually something quite different that's
Yeah.
being that kind of, I guess, the uncanny valley of more traditional instruments. and then also there was a lot of synthesized stuff. I think I also wanted it to be very cute and very sweet and like naive and vulnerable and not even that polished. I think I really wanted this kind of far more honest and far more vulnerable way of evoking, especially Bella's kind of early experiences. And
Yeah,
like it couldn't be just like this kind of very objective, like slick Hollywood invincible kind of music. It had to be, as unbalanced as she was. And also a great thing, which I think, from my background of writing pop songs a lot, was really satisfying to work on was the fact that because she's basically a new person, she's experiencing a great deal of incredibly emotional events very suddenly. Like she's, love for the first time, affection, and like also seeing like death and horror and famine,
yeah,
and then she's finding out later on why she decided to kill herself and so on. And like because she's feeling these things for the first time, there was the opportunity to like really searingly concentrate them, make them.
yeah.
I don't know if melodramatic's the right word because I think it's so appropriately extreme and painful when you feel all of these things for the first time.
Yeah, and also the kind of way that the music kind of follows the journey with her as she grows, as she learns, as she becomes more experienced, and that kind of beautiful kind of, I don't know, it's a beautiful kind of, she continues to be this free spirit right through, you know what I mean? Nothing seems to kind of, she goes through all these experiences, but I don't know, she comes out the other side of it, just this extraordinary being that you're even more captivated by at the start. And you kind of feel like, as she starts, as she's rebirthed, the music is kind of almost got kind of like a real childlike quality to it, but it kind of grows with her. Is that a fair, would you say that's a fair thing to comment on, just?
Yeah, no, I'd fully agree. It's like, so much of it is down to how extraordinary Emma's performance is. But the most interesting part is there's not a point where she's normal. It's like she starts from being kind of like way less experienced and knowledgeable than it, and she's basically a kid. And it kind of grows, in like outside of she kind of like avoids ever being like a normal mature age, and then suddenly
Yeah.
goes from this kind of like weird juvenile to being kind of superhuman in her psychology and emotion and intelligence. So that it's yeah. For me, though, was that it was nice that there was no point where you had to settle for like something more orthodox and expected. Like and there's so much of her in the end and the beginning. There's like she's so courageous in the beginning, even though she's kind of an idiot. And at the
Yeah.
end, there's still this kind of childlike optimism and then like, adoration towards people who are formerly her carers, as well as her now being, phenomenally, mature and like hyper intelligent and kind of now with the uh, vindication to start changing the world as she sees fit. So the whole arc is just fascinating, and
Yeah.
there's infinite amount of stuff there to be thinking about musically.
Yeah. Were you when did you start creating? Because obviously you've got music in the film, for that dance scene, and you're in the film as well,
Mm.
in the band. And so that obviously had to be written prior to filming. And I wondered what point, were you working before along on the rest of the score before they were filming, or were you reacting to being on set and watching things as they were, because it fits so seeing that 200-page document with so much in it, that's one
Mm.
thing. But being on those sets, whether it be like the Lisbon set, which I believe took 45 minutes to walk around, the scale of
Yeah.
these things and the world that he's created, I mean, it's so hard to, and I kind of almost avoid telling describing the film to people. All I say is you have to watch it, because you
Mm.
don't want to spoil anything for anyone, because it's such an experience. But for you, so this is the longest question I've ever asked, but for you, in terms of, were you reacting to, were you privy to performances as they were happening and reacting to that, or when were you creating music for the film?
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, I totally agree. Like the sets, like, Lisbon's one example, but like, I mean, I was really lucky. I got the opportunity to visit most of the sets while we were in the process of
Amazing.
filming. And like they are, I think, the VFX department has done like such a wonderful job in like putting so much stuff together and with the animals. But I think if you watch the film, you'd be surprised at how much stuff was actually in the camera and how little like all the skies, like the really kind of it's like that they're all physically present, and like these huge screens behind the sets, and it's an incredible environment. Most of the music I wrote actually before filming started. I was given all these materials about, I want to say, 6 or so months before principal photography. And then I mean, it was very inspiring to see the set, and I definitely wrote a bunch of music when I came back. And then um, there were maybe 2 or so scenes where there was some gaps that needed plugging, maybe 2 or 3. So I used some of the stuff I'd written based on my experience seeing the set in full. I
Mm.
mean, part of me obviously would have loved to see the set first, just to have that experience. But no,
Mm.
no, most of it, and I think that's kind of what contributes to the music being slightly less of a cosmetic spectacle and a lot more to do, I believe, with just this interior psychology and the internal reactions and the emotional interiors of the characters, rather than trying to be something kind of more classically bombastic. So in that way
Mm.
around, it worked. But yeah, no, most of the stuff I think before was filming.
The opening, we hear music before we see anything. You hear, and then we have this scene of a woman, falling off a bridge, and we have no idea. You don't know what's going on at that point. It's kind of, it's a really
Mm.
interesting into the film sort of thing. But in terms of, that cue at that point, in terms of it's almost like the past but the future. The future for us as film fans, but it's the past in terms of the narrative of the story. In a way,
Mm.
it's such an interesting sort of thing to think about in terms of when you're putting a piece of music to that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
And you're setting
yeah,
a
it's such a
tone as well for the film, is in a weird way as well, because it's like
yeah.
it's the start, it's
It's I
opening.
think as well that that motif that comes at the very beginning, this kind of 4 note sort of discordant-ish sequence on the violins, like that kind of comes up a lot. And I by the end, when we're thinking about it, that kind of became our kind of like analog for, yeah, the past of Bella's character, for what her previous life would have been. So like, in the scenes where she's in it, it becomes it's really in stark contrast, and especially
Mm,
towards the end of the film where you see her life, it's just that theme over and over, and it gets more and more intense.
mm.
But like during the whole journey, there are bits where that seems kind of like more subtly interwoven to the other stuff, and you hear it more like, in the bass sometimes, or just kind of very unnoticeable. But it's always this shadow of her previous life that I think is hanging over the whole story.
And was there a kind of uh a, a, a a thought of kind of as the world changes for us in terms of watching the film, as we go from black and white to color, for example, and things like
Mm.
that, is the idea that that the sonic scape changes as well as the visual scape changes.
Sure. No, I think the music definitely, like, that there's more instruments are added, like literally just the frequency range becomes wider, you get more at the bottom, and slightly more at the top, and like, yeah, and like harmonically as well, like a great deal of pieces from the beginning is slightly more simple and diatonic, and then you get these more mixed emotions, these kind of chords which are like kind of a bit happy but kind of a bit queasy. So yeah, not so exaggeratedly, but in general, the music I think does kind of swell and mature with Bella's uh character, her
Mm.
personality and experience. But I think also it's, as we said, like she never becomes normal, and the score never becomes that normal. I think it still retains this kind of childishness and
Yeah,
rough courage, I suppose.
because the bit where quite near the beginning where she's asleep and the maid comes in to open the curtains and Max is observing her, and that starts off as quite a kind of a traditional-ish, as what you say, kind of cue almost, and then it just kind of like it sort of like just goes a bit, it goes totally kind of crazy and abstract. It's such a great
Hmm.
kind of leads you in almost with this like false sense of kind of, it's like, oh, she's asleep, oh, the curtains are open, and then suddenly it comes a bit kind of, it's really clever, it's really really kind of like an awakening type thing. It's brilliant. I love that bit.
Sure, thanks.
There's a couple of cues I wrote down as well. I mean, the cue as well when God's explaining Bella's story to Max, in terms of
Mm,
what that does. Because there's some really clever, I think the way that you and Yorgos have worked to create cues that go over dialogue, how they also go over scenes without dialogue, like when she's exploring Lisbon and she sees the couple arguing, and almost like it feels like the music's almost a slight internalization of her emotion as she's witnessing all these different things in a way.
mm,
And then also not using music, that's almost as important, as where you use music as not using music. That must have come
mm.
into the conversation with Yorgos as well, then, in terms of from both sides of you, maybe.
Yeah, to a certain extent. No, no, it's yeah, I think no, it's an interesting way of categorizing actually the kind of verbal and non-verbal parts. I think there's definitely an element of you can see some of the pieces can really clearly come from Bella internally, and like it's almost like kind of miming her feelings, and then other parts it's actually her being unaware of something very big and dark swirling around her, and it's
Mm.
it's it's a subtle and it's a weird kind of distinction to have kind of executed. But yeah, no, that does make sense. And yeah, no, I think I mean again, like so much of the decision as to where music is or isn't in the film is down to Yorgos.
Mm.
And to be honest, when I was writing, I wasn't expecting there to be as much music as there ended up being. And I think it was ended up being an important part of trying to communicate this kind of unspoken emotion or unspoken threat around the film. But
Yeah.
I think no, he's great at, knowing when to cut the tension and when to have this kind of empty space. And also a lot of it was down to Johnny Byrne, who was their sound designer. And he's worked with Yorgos since The Lobster, and he was, phenomenal sound designer. And we had a lot of chats when we were in the mixing stage of the film
Yeah.
about if there's music playing, does it, there are bits where it wants to be drowned out by the noise around it, and there are bits where you actually want to like totally remove all the sound design, so the music's actually very painfully apparent, and the interplay with silence and not silence and all of this atmosphere in the music, I think actually has such a large role to play in the effect music has. So, I'm very thankful to, Johnny as well in his own
Yeah.
right is just so creative and talented about what he does
Yeah.
with the sound.
It's the scale of what he does, from the kind of subtle stuff that you don't even realize is it has been so much work to create, to almost the kind of the really obvious kind of like cranked up, like, with a squish 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 bit, and kind of
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
things like that where you can see it's just fun. And it kind of
yeah.
just, yeah, it's like, I've seen the film like 3 4 times now, and every time that just makes me want to like vomit the song. It's just so good. But it's like you can see that there are that, that kind of collaboration, like you were saying, like with Yorgos, with the freedom that he kind of gave you, is like similarly with Johnny, and what he kind of loves is people doing what they do, and what they do really heightening the story and telling the story in a specific Yorgos way, I think.
Mm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think all of us, like, yeah, all of the people who are collaborating on this final thing love that freedom. I think you can tell this isn't that this is the work from every department of people who realize that they can do what they want and they can actually have a lot of fun with it. And that it's like, set design, which is going so much further and more, elaborate than it ever, you
Yeah.
never need to. I think it's people doing more than they feel like they need to. And like, this isn't just a job for anyone. Like, there's such a collective belief and passion for the telling of this story. And, it's been so lovely working with these people. And there is just this unspoken sense that, we're not going to do what we're expected to do. We're all going to actually like, really push it to a like, an extent where, yeah, something really dizzying, I think.
Yeah. Um, can we talk about the dance, because it is brilliant? I kind of almost want to embrace that at every opportunity I have where I have to dance in public, that I just
Mm.
kind of embrace Bella and just kind of go for it. It's so freeing to watch in a way.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing sequence. Yeah, no, I mean, it was really fun working with Constanza McCrass, who's the choreographer, on that, and writing the music for that sequence. And it's great because it's such a funny scene. I think Mark and Emma are both phenomenal in
So good.
how they both act, but there's such an amount of dense storytelling in it, as well as it just being a really, very funny and very beautiful sequence to watch. Like all of the little dance things about like how Mark ends up kind of a beat behind Bella most of the time. And it's like this is almost the point where you realize that she's been in control the whole time, and he's actually, being fucked about with by her rather than the other way around. And like all of this like nuance in it, and him kind of being humiliated, and her actually, realizing that she can, I think it's a really pivotal plot moment. And yeah, just
Yeah.
filming it was great fun. Like it took days and days to get the whole thing in sync, and the band's all playing live. There's no
Are
pre-record on it.
you?
So yeah, so it was like a very because there's stunts as well, and like different elements of the dancing, and we're actually having to accompany everything in camera. So yeah, a lot of work, but like it was like rehearsing a play more than like filming for a thing, because it was so, it had to be
And what?
so tightly synchronized.
Yeah. And when you with in writing that specific piece of music, then in terms of, knowing that within this scene there is so much storytelling going on without dialogue, was that something that you're conscious of whilst you're writing? Did you kind of collaborate in terms of, what kind of tempo it needed to be, or, how it shifts, that kind of thing? Or what was the kind of journey of that piece of music?
That's a good question. I mean, a big question was to do with it's one of the only kind of diegetic pieces of music, and like what was the relationship between my score and the music that's actually in the universe. And I think I actually wanted it to be slightly more grounded in reality, and I did do an amount of research on like traditional Portuguese music and stuff. I didn't, follow it too closely in the end, but I wanted to know where it would be coming from, because I
Mm,
think it was important the music had, it had to have something kind of like odd and alluring and really primal to it, just to attract Bella in the first place. But then also it needed to be, Bella's weirdness had to stand out from the music, and it was really important that she was weirder than everything else happening in the scene, just to like, emphasize how separate and unique she is in the film. So it was this kind of fine line between something that she would have been really entranced by, but
mm.
also was more drab than she was, more traditional than she was, right?
Yeah. Did he did Yorgos play any of your music on set, in terms of, it's interesting when I've had the luxury of speaking to composers, and occasionally, when the music has been written in advance of the film, for the director, sometimes having that music to play cast and crew on set kind of really helps. It kind of, it's a tonal thing. It's a kind of, it's sets the world almost in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Yorgos loves this is part of the reason why he built such elaborate and working sets, that he wanted as little artifice as possible. He wanted this like, real sense of immersion. And yeah, I believe that a lot of the music was played on set, just as like, before and after takes, as like this atmospheric kind of guidance. And this is, a way that Yorgos works in quite a lot. And also, I think because Emma as well, who's like a producer on the film, like
Mm,
the Yorgos and Emma had been chatting for so long before even formal rehearsals had started about what the conception of this character might be. And it's great that she was producing as well, because there's this collaboration on like every aspect of the film,
mm.
not just what her performance is. So things like how it looked and how the music sounded, I think from the very beginning were really kind of integrated into Bella's DNA, and I think that really shows in the film.
Did she speak to you much about it then? Did you converse with Emma much about various bits of
Not before,
music?
yeah, not much before. I mean, I was mainly chatting to Yorgos before filming started, and then like yeah, on set more, especially during the dance sequence and stuff. After that, there were that's when the people I was talking to kind of expanded more, and I could start sharing my ideas about it and discuss the interplay. But
Mm,
yeah, yeah,
amazing. And listen, I've overstepped my time here with you. It's so great to get to talk to you specifically about so much of it. It's
sure.
such an important part to the film and the story and the experience. So it's been great to chat to you about it. Thank you so much for your time, Jessica.
Absolutely. No, it's been lovely to chat to you. Great to see you again.
Yeah, you too. Have a great day. See you later.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Take care. Bye bye.